Good morning, everybody. It's Lynn from A Bit of Birdsong. I want to take 1 minute and talk to you before we get into this second video in the series, the Quilt-Cover Journal with Me series, and I am just loving the idea of all of us journaling together. I want to go back to this first cover page that we did in the first video, and I want to share a couple of things I did. I lightened it up a little more. I know we talked about, and that was with white acrylic paint, by the way. Then after that was completely dry, I went back in with some gloss varnish. This is something, this Galleria acrylic medium. Keep this on hand for my, my canvas paintings to put a layer on when I'm done. And I know we've talked about doing new things. I wanted to see what the finished page would be like if I put kind of a thick layer of this gloss varnish on the page. Now I could kick myself because I should have been more careful with the brush strokes. When you're actually varnishing a canvas, you have to take really deliberate, smooth strokes so that the finished canvas doesn't have obvious streaks in it. You want it to be one smooth surface. I did a messy job on this, and part of that was because I poured too much out at one time and it started running and I wanted to quickly get it into place. That said, I love what it did to this page. It gave this page a real hard finish, and I like that it's glossy. I like the way it turned out. I also took that first entry that I had put into the front, and from the magazine page we all have, I scanned my page and I printed a copy out and just cut out this little piece and distressed it so that that piece of notebook paper is not glaring. The third thing that I did was to add this piece of lace trim. We also have some lace in the packs. It's pretty easy to go back and sew on the edge of a page. Thin journals like this, you can just fold the covers back on each other, and I sewed that into place. The one thing I had to be careful of was opening up my pocket and stitching on, you know, the edge of the card and the washi tape so that would still open and close. With all of this being shared, I'm going to go ahead and get into the first video where we journal together. I've been thinking about what to do first. Hopefully in your packages I put in some little paper squares that have been cut out. You can cut any kind of paper shapes that you want to use. I'm going to put a layer of acrylic paint on this page, and I'm using vanilla as the color instead of stark white. You could also use gesso, or you could use gesso first. You don't really have to have gesso with acrylic paint. And I tell you something else I'm going to do is go ahead and put something protective on this side of the page because I don't want this to get on the other pages too much. I can be a little messy, and it doesn't really bother me to have things overlap. To me, it just makes things prettier. But I'm not sure I want a big streak of acrylic paint over on that side of that beautiful frame in the front. This paint actually matches really nicely with the color of the paper on this side. So I'm going to put a little bit more, and I am going to get more on the edges. The next thing that I'm going to do is to glue down my paper squares. I know the acrylic is still a little bit wet, but it'll just help things stick. I'm going to put a little bit of glue on the back of that. Press that down. Press that one down. And you can change the papers that you're using. You do not have to use any of the squares that I put in. And if you want yours to all have a certain color, you could go in that direction. These are all different. I want kind of a mixed media page here. Something that's easy. Ooh, that's pretty. I might use that side. I didn't even realize that was on that side. I guess I should pay more attention. So that's pretty interesting. I don't know that I would have said, oh, I want to make a page with these colors, but we're doing some things to have fun and to experiment. So I thought using 6 totally different squares might be fun to do. While that is starting to dry, I'm going to get out my distress inks. I thought I would use some blue distress ink on this page, and again, you can just put the stamp pad right on the page to get some color down. Just, you know, it does leave a square shape, so I'm going to put, just be careful not to get too much of something like paint on the brush. You don't want to ruin your stamp pad. I know I've said before that I'm kind of rough on things, but I don't do it on purpose. I just don't, I guess I like overlap. Oh, that was neat. That's really cool. Not sure what that looks like. And we don't want to get the page too wet. We don't want to tear it. So I wonder if we want any more, just a little bit of the old photo on the edges. So this color is this is the Tim Holtz Distress Oxide stamp pads. I love these distress inks. I really want to try some other colors, and I'm going to before we're done with this journal. So I'm just going to mix in some of this color with the blue. They blend nicely. I like that. And just be gentle with the page. You don't want to start tearing that outer layer of paper. I've done that before. It's not a good look. Of course, you just go on with the program if that happens. And you could just put more, you could put some gesso over it. That's one of the things I love about this this mode of making art. You can just keep adding layers. Let that dry a little bit. Since we've got some blue going on over here, I had planned to, I want to build up this page and not make these squares so glaring. I want it to be more like a faded quilt. So I've pulled out some of my blue. We have pale blue, the Neptune blue, mermaid teal, sky blue. So we're going to do, one thing I love about acrylic paint is how quickly it dries. I'm going to pour out some of this Neptune blue on my paper. And I'm going to pour out some more of the So I'm going to just, I'm winging it here. That's doing kind of what I want to do. Don't be afraid to do new things. Don't be afraid to try things. I probably should have gotten a bigger piece of paper so I don't have to slide this around. And I'm probably going to get some stuff on the other side of that page. And don't worry if it gets on the squares a little bit. That's kind of what we want. And don't forget, you can go back and add like more of your lighter color paint. So I've just mixed the blue and the white, or the vanilla. You could use white. Put a little dot right there. I'm just going to go right. Make it like a quilt. That's pretty. I remember a story in college that we had to read and write about. We had to write an essay, and I just remember there was a quilt in it. It seems like there were two sisters in a family One wanted to use the quilt and one wanted to keep it safe and preserved. I connected with the person who wanted to use it and love it and just keep it out and make it a part of everyday life. It was an interesting discovery about ourselves as students, and then to talk about that. So I want to build up, get in those little cutout areas. I think I want to tone these down a little bit more. You don't have to do that. If you like for the squares to be, you make them as bright as you want them to be, because this, you know, once you get the acrylic paint on here, it is going to, it's going to stay. You can't really, you can wipe some of it off, but not all of it. So I definitely wanted a layered look on this page. I think that might be enough. I don't want to overdo it. So I want another layer of something. I don't want it to dominate. You have to be careful using your ink stamps with acrylic paint. If it dries on there, it can really mess it up. So you have to wash them right after if you get. So I want some more interest on this page, and I'm going to take the stamp pad that I have that has writing. That one says "I love you." I have just a very few stamps that have any writing on them, and I'm just going to add a little bit. You don't even have to press the whole stamp down. And again, I don't want it to look contrived. I've got a brush with a little bit of water on it. I'm just going to blend this in. It almost looks like rust spots or something on an old quilt. You know how that happens. Then I'm going to take the brush I dipped it in some excess acrylic paint over here and with the water, and then I just squeezed the brush so it drops kind of randomly, and that gives a different look definitely from brush strokes. And then let's just close those pages together for a little bit. Not for too long though, because that one had glue on it. You want to be careful. The desk may look the same right now, but I just got home from working and this page has had plenty of time to dry. I had a wonderful day at work. So where we are with this page so far, I think I had been talking about how this page picked up some of this paint, and I love how it builds the page up. Now, the page is really, it's pretty smooth, it's dry. I like the way that this looks. Acrylic paint and gesso can be kind of really dry. I mean, it's not chalky, but it's not, what's the word, like a glossy, hard finish, if you will. What I want this page to represent, to me, I wanted to use these little squares to give the feeling of a quilt, and I wanted it to look old. So if you want to follow that, of course, you can set yours up however you want to. The squares, you can pick different squares, you can add more. And on this page, what I want to do is put an image, and I'm going to do some journaling on top of that. So for this page, what I would suggest is to pick an image of a person or an animal that you want to have a quilt. I picked this beautiful image of an old Currier and Ives. This is probably originally from the 1850s, and this is called Little Beauty. So old-fashioned. She's got the bare shoulder. I want her to have the quilt. So I'm just going to tear her out, or tear the paper from around the old image. I hope you can hear me okay. There's a fan running in the kitchen. My Jason is so good to me. I've worked all day, and you know I love my job. that he has already cooked, and that's really sweet that he does that for me. So I want this kind of low on the page because I'm going to journal, and I may journal actually right down on top of it. I'm going to use glue on the back. I'm going to spread it out a little bit so that it doesn't look clumpy underneath. So I love that look. That's really pretty. So we have a quilt on the left with a little bit of distressing. I may go back and add some more. And on this page, so remember that if you have just an inkjet printer, you don't want to get your hands wet and do a lot of rubbing on the image because it will fade it. I printed that this morning so the ink is dry, but I have printed things before and then put my hands on them too quickly, and it wasn't a good result. These journals are going to be so pretty by the end of the month, by the end of our 30 days. I want to distress the edges of that. And I'll put a little bit more right there. So I'm going to just journal about what's actually going on with me every day. I want to look back and have this be, you know, a memory of what was actually going on in my life. So again, I have taken some water into the brush, and I'm just going to drip some darker stains on the pages. I don't want to get anything on her face. That's pretty. I want a little bit more of this, perhaps. Still got some ink on the stamp, so I might as well use it. Alright, I'm going to let this page dry a little bit before I write on it, and you can see how the water is picking up the blue and it's kind of running with that, and we've got the brown color. I think it's really, really pretty. Let's go ahead and get just a little bit more, staining so it doesn't just look like a circle around the edge of that. I put just a tiny bit on her forehead. We are always finding really old things at work, and the discoloration is everywhere. It doesn't discriminate, so sometimes it covers up an eye, or it just makes it look more authentic too. Add some staining in the center. I just wonder if I want to do anything else to this. I do like the looks of this though. I feel like this page over here needs a little something. I kind of want these squares to pop out a little more, even though I wanted them to be washed out, if that makes any sense. I'm going to just take a watercolor pencil and go around the edge. But before I do too much of it, I want to take some water on a paintbrush and see what happens when I just blend that a little bit. I'm not sure. I'm going to carry on with it just since I've started it. And that way you will know what it looks like. You may not want to do this on yours. I kind of like the faded look as well. And I know that I've said it before, if I don't like it, it just means it's not finished. That's what layers and layers and layers are for. I kind of want to give it more of the effect of the actual fabric that runs between the quilt squares, and I feel like that all of this is running together so much, it doesn't quite have the look yet of a quilt. But I do like this. I wasn't sure at first. So I really like that. I know we talked about lettering some, and I do want to work on my handwriting as we go through this book. I'm going to write directly onto the page with just a colored pencil. It's not a watercolor pencil because I don't want it to run everywhere. I'm going to just write in just regular print, and I may go back over and darken up some of the words. I used a stamp for the T to make it a little larger. So I said I was going to write in a regular print, and I switched to cursive. I actually write in cursive most of the time. 9. And I do want to put a little more white between the squares to maybe give more of a look of a quilt. I like it. And I love this dragonfly stamp. I wanted to put that there. That's really pretty. I like that a lot. You know, I remember now, and it's funny how things tie in when you don't think that one thing you're doing relates to anything else, and then all of a sudden you find this connection. And you wonder if maybe somewhere in your mind you knew exactly what you were doing. But I remembered the story that was kind of making me think about the quilt, and it was by Alice Walker, called Everyday Use, and it was about an African American family and just the cultural tradition of the quilts that they made. And there was a struggle just between the two daughters, and the way the mother had to make decisions about these quilts, and just the direction the two daughters went and how they dealt with things and how they also dealt with their heritage. I'm going to read that story again. It's been maybe 35 years since I read that story, and I remember liking it very much and really enjoying writing the essay on the story. I would like to put a quote on the page, maybe from that story. Now that I have this story in my mind, and I'm just totally purposed to go back and read it again, if you like to read, I think you would enjoy it. And a lot of you may have already read it. I know Alice Walker is a very famous writer, very talented, and so I have this one of my heavy tags. I like to punch tags out of really heavy cardstock. So if I get a really nice piece, I don't ever throw it out. I know that it's probably going to get turned into a tag for my journals or for the shop. So I want to include Alice Walker on this page. My quilt is a very traditional symmetric, 6 squares, just nothing exciting, old-fashioned I guess, and I made it for the little beauty from the 1850s. And because of that sort of rabbit trail, I remembered how much I loved Everyday Use by Alice Walker. I've purposed to read the book again. I think I like that across the bottom. The point is these quilts. And of course we're going to distress that some. I don't want that stark white. The scary thing is, the point is with this, not to ruin that lettering. And try not to get too much. Oh yeah, see? You can kind of see some fading in that ink. Let's add some more white. And we might tone down that distress ink. There's some yarn and eyelash trim. I'm going to use a piece of something in this tag. The point is these quilts. Everybody has a style. It might be a little unexpected to put this on the page. The page at first seemed so vintage, so antique, and then we fast forward into modern times, but don't be afraid to do contrast. This is definitely a contrast in many ways, and there are comparisons to make as well. I know we have also in our packs a long vellum envelope. I'm just going to cut that corner. Another thing I want to do while I'm thinking about it is take an A and a W. Put those on there. I want Alice to be visible. I don't want to cover up my quilt. I don't want to cover up my writing. So I think this is going to be a good time to use a piece of this card. I love little flip out sections, and this is going to be quick, just to stress the edges. Yeah, I like that. Any area that stands up takes so much more of that ink. It really makes it start looking old. I recently bought this this washi tape. I think I got it at Target. Let's do it on that side. Now we can have her on the outside or the inside. I think I'm going to put it on the inside. Alice in there. Oh, I like that. I like that a lot. To read again, just as a final touch. First of all, I want to cover this sweet little face. Get a little bit of this vanilla paint. I probably got way too much, but that's okay. And get my big brush, one of the biggest brushes, and get some water on it. And mix up some thin. White dots. I'm going to stop for now. I'm really excited to hear your comments and to just see how the direction that your page went in. If you chose a different image to give your quilt to, it's going to be a totally different story. And you may not have even followed this. You might have done something totally different on page 1, which is completely wonderful. For me, I wanted to make a quilt, and I had that story on my mind. I knew I wanted to use this beautiful image of a young girl who I thought would like the quilt. Went back to the 1850s with that image, and then I remembered very clearly the name of the short story and started reading, and the story kind of just came to life again in my memory. And of course there's the tie there between the Civil War and the real debate in this story about the true way to honor your heritage or your culture. And so this is what I ended up with. There's a lot of blue. It's symmetrical. It's simple. I don't know that I really showed anybody anything new on this page. Maybe I did some things you've not done before. I hope that this page allowed you to explore more like an idea instead of just taking images and gluing them on a page. If you start following a train of thought and continue to add symbolism for that, it normally ends up with just a really pretty spread, and I do that a lot. So that's all for now. The next video, we're going to move on to this page. Everybody's going to have some different colors on their page, and that might take you in a different direction. Oh, it's so exciting. Isn't this fun?